you very much, Molly, and thank you everyone for joining me on today's session. It's a pleasure to be here. So as well as being parent and coordinator for the ADHD Foundation, I'm also parent to some neurodivergent young people myself. So certainly this has been something that has been something that I've had to support my young people over the years. So hopefully I can give you some general ideas and tips that you can sort of support your young person with as they prepare for their exam period. First of all, though, thinking about exam stress. So exams can be anxiety provoking for most students in general, you know, neurodivergent or not. But for our neurodivergent young people, exam pressures can be really, really overwhelming. So it might be that those exam worries, like they might become sort of more pervasive, develop into more sort of severe anxiety, might impact on their academic achievements really, and their general well-being as well. I think that that level of anxiety, that increased anxiety, can certainly impact on their general well-being on a day-to-day basis. There can be challenges with exams, excuse me, for a number of reasons really. So it could be things like interpreting the meaning of questions. Maybe that's what they're worried about when those questions comes up. You know, maybe that's an area that they struggle with. It may be that they're worried about planning, being able to plan what to write in the exam, knowing which information is important and which isn't, being able to sort of decipher that, being able to sort of weed out what they don't need to know, what they do need to know. Maybe it's as simple as worrying about time management, being able to keep to time, being able to plan, being able to pace themselves through the exam. Maybe that's something that they struggle with. And it could be challenges with being able to move on to questions, particularly if they've not been able to answer a question or not been able to answer a question fully. It might be that they really struggle to move on from one question to the next if they've not been able to complete that question. It could be that in terms of studying, in terms of actually sitting exams, it might be that anxiety is around their lack of confidence in their skills, their lack of confidence in being able to retain information, remember information, recall information during the tests as well. For some of our young people, they've had previous tests, previous exams, maybe they've been doing some mock tests and exams, and it's because of those previous exams that they've had some, particularly if they've had some difficulties, then that might be what's affecting their confidence and their self-esteem in terms of being able to sit the exams. But knowing what difficulties our young people have and what areas, you know, are going to exacerbate any anxieties that they're feeling can really help us to be able to support our young people. Or if there are young people on the line today, you know, if you can identify where are your challenges, where are your difficulties, what are the things that are most likely to cause you anxiety, then we can start to unpick that and look at the best strategies and identify ways to be able to support you. And that's what I really want to take from today's session. I really want for you as individuals or your parents and carers, depending on who's on the line today, to really explore and think about the challenges that you may have or your young person may be experiencing, and then think about the best way to support that. So hopefully you'll be able to take some ideas away with you from today's session. One of the, or some of the particular areas that our young people may struggle with, or you may well be struggling with yourself in terms of exams or revision, can be around executive function. So executive function difficulties tend to be a common thread for our neurodivergent young people. So young people with executive function challenges, they tend to struggle with school anyway. They tend to struggle with some aspects of school and certainly with studying. So these executive function challenges can make studying for exams and actually sitting those exams really difficult. So thinking about what does that look like for you? What does that look like for your young person? So think about, for example, impulse control. For some of our young people, if they really struggle with managing those impulses, it might be that when they are, whether it be for a sort of revision prep, and taking notes, or whether it be when they're actually sitting the exam. It could be that they sort of rush things, they don't take in all the information, they make careless mistakes, they're sort of maybe in particular during the exam situation answering a question and then moving on to the next. I've done that, so I move on. I've done that, so I've moved on. So not taking the time to think about the answer, not checking the answers. It's just that sort of I've done it, move on type of impulsive response. Emotional control. So certainly when our young people are experiencing anxiety, they can certainly struggle to manage their emotions. They might become very easily overwhelmed, and we can see for some of our young people, they might start to panic. Now that might be panicking, you know, during the exam or at the start of the exam, the day before the exam, but actually even panicking, feeling overwhelmed, feeling that increasing anxiety when they're trying to study, particularly if they feel as if they're not retaining information, they haven't got strategies in place that support the best way for them to revise. Flexible thinking can be a real challenge for some of our neurodivergent young people. So they might have difficulties with both oral and written communication. They might have difficulty with interpreting questions. They might have a very literal understanding. So having a literal understanding that affects maybe how they would answer a question or how they would interpret a question may be a challenge for them. So they might not really understand, or they may well struggle with open-ended questions, for example. Also being able to move on, like I said earlier, move on from one question to the next, particularly if, like I said, they've not, or being able to start a task can be difficult for our young people. It might be that, you know, they find it really difficult to get motivated to start their revision. It might be that they find it really difficult to get motivated to start that exam, spend quite a bit of time sort of psyching themselves up, trying to sort of motivate themselves to start. We might see a lot of procrastination. Some of our young people, they might not even see the point in the exam. So, you know, it might be that they are well aware that they've got all this knowledge, they know they've got all this knowledge about a particular subject, but what's the point? So what's the point? Why do we even need to do that exam? So explaining to our young people, motivating them and letting them know the importance of being able to demonstrate that knowledge within the exam. And then organisation. So actually being able to get themselves physically and mentally organised to revise, to complete the exam. So getting together everything that they need to study, everything that they need to be able to complete the exam on the day. Thinking about organising their notes, organising their books, their pads, their pens, having everything an organised workspace so that they can effectively study, being able to plan and organise that study schedule as well. So for many of our young people, or for many of you young people, difficulties with these skills can significantly impact on their ability to study and prepare for an exam. And that then can exacerbate any anxieties that they may well have. So like I've said, it's really important that we understand our challenges, any difficulties that we may have, particularly in these areas, and then put strategies in place to support yourself or to support your young person. Sensory differences can also have a significant impact on our young people. So a lot of our neurodivergent young people often experience some sort of sensory differences. So, and if we think about that in terms of you know, the exam day, for example, the size, you know, of the area that maybe they're going to be completing their exam. So the exam halls, it may be in a hall. It may be in an unfamiliar environment, so it might be things like lighting has an impact on our young people, noise, smells. It might be that, you know, just having somebody walking around the hall, it's sort of invigilating that exam can be something that they find really distracting or even overwhelming. And so it's important that we're aware of our young people in terms of their sensory differences, in terms of their sensory profile, if there is anything that is going to present as a challenge for them within that environment. It may be in terms of acoustics in a big room, for example, that they really struggle. Are they going to be able to wear maybe some earbuds or ear defences? It might be for some of our young people that they might need something that, you know, that to help them calm, to help them sort of get proprioceptive type input. So thinking about even simple things like chewing a bit of gum, is that something that is going to be able to be accessible? If they usually have something like a fidget, so maybe if they just have a little bit of blue tactile to fidget with, really. But thinking about what are the types of things that your young person or you as a young person are going to struggle with in terms of those sensory differences, and speaking to the Senko about how they can best be supported. For some of our young people, it might be that they have challenges with motor skills, so particularly those fine motor skills. So it might be that, you know, in terms of that proprioceptive system, so our body awareness, knowing where our body is in terms of in space, so being able to do things like write. They might really struggle to write. It might take them longer to write. Their handwriting may be difficult to read. So it might be for some of our young people that we need to think about accessibility arrangements as part of their support in order for them to be able to complete their exams. And I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail as we go through the session. But test anxiety in itself can be really stressful for our young people. So test anxiety in general is really, really common. So over 60% of students will experience test anxiety at some point. But for you guys, for our neurodivergent young people, then it can be really, really intense and interfere with their ability to be able to do well, not just in the test itself, but within that preparation and that revision for the test. So there can be lots of reasons for experiencing test anxiety. So thinking about uncertainty, so uncertainty around the exam itself, that can be a huge source of stress. So it might be that they've had some practice sessions in terms of tests and exams. So it might be that they've done mock exams, for example, but that still leaves part of the real exam which remain sort of unknown, I suppose, uncertain. So you don't know who it is who's going to be invigilating, you don't know who's going to be giving those papers out, you don't know, you may not know where it's going to be, you are not likely to know where you're going to be sitting, you know, what is the environment going to be like, so what are the structure of the questions. So thinking about those types of uncertainties, can we try and have a conversation with our young people, or as young people, can you ask questions about what can you expect? What is going to happen during the exam? For some of you, you may benefit from a social story, so talking about exactly what they can expect, what is going to happen, what is the process during the exam. Can they find out in advance? Can you be told in advance which rooms you're going to be in? Can you go and see the rooms? Is there going to be somewhere that you are best, in terms of seating, where is the best position for you in terms of seating? Is that something that can be accommodated before you go into that exam? Also, uncertainty, thinking about what does revision look like? What is the best way that works for you? What is the best way that works for your young person in terms of revision techniques? Often, education professionals will highlight the importance of revision, but what does that mean to you? What does that mean for your young person? Do you know what strategies work best for you? Do you know what strategies would make the revision successful for you? Do you know the best way to do it, the best time to do it, the best place to do revision? Are these things that have actually been thought about? Fear of failure as well can cause test anxiety. So, worrying about not doing as well as you would like to do, not doing well as others expect you to do, your own expectations and other people's expectations in terms of what you should be able to do, particularly, if generally you are quite good academically, well, that can increase anxiety, because sometimes, you know, that we may sort of not sort of be able to demonstrate that knowledge in or be worried that we're not able to demonstrate that knowledge in a test situation. You know, think about that mind going blank, not being able to recall information because of anxiety. In particular, anxiety can exacerbate those challenges anyway. So thinking about as well, you know, maybe for some of our young people, maybe for you, that you have feel as if when you go into those tests that actually no matter how much you've studied, that you've still not got that knowledge. You don't really feel prepared. You don't feel as if your study was thorough enough, or maybe the strategies you were using maybe weren't as successful as you'd like. It might be that because of previous tests, it might be because of the mocks that you've done, maybe you didn't do as well as you thought you were going to do, and so because of that, that's what's causing the stress, because your previous experiences are sort of giving you that anxiety, and you're thinking that you're not likely to do as well. Situational causes as well, so just thinking about the pure pressure of a timed test, and being able to take those tests in a crowded room. Think about those sensory challenges, for example, unpredictability, not knowing what to expect, lack of understanding of the material, and also thinking about, you know, worrying about if you don't get the grades that you need. What are the consequences if you're not getting the grades that you need? You know, do you need specific grades to be able to go to a specific sixth form, for example, or to be able to go to the college that you want to go to? So actually anxiety around not achieving what you need to, your own expectations, like it says, and that just general feeling of lack of control, that worry about letting down yourself, letting down others. So all of these things are often things going through your young person's mind, your mind, in terms of the tests, which then can exacerbate any anxiety our young people are experiencing. I just want to mention exam access arrangements. I think it's really important that we mention these. So for a lot of, you know, for some of our young people, it might be that they are entitled to some access arrangements. So thinking about how we can access that for our young people. So it might be that school have already recognised that they've got these needs and put adjustments in place already to support your young people, to support you, to make sure that your needs don't put you at a disadvantage compared to your peers. So schools they've got some sort of they can make arrangements for in some areas. Regional adjustments can be made in some areas, and for some they would need to apply basically for those exam access arrangements. So thinking about what they are. Now, in terms of exam access arrangements, it's a bit of a mouthful, that, isn't it? For them to be granted or and to be considered, it needs to be the student's normal way of working. And the student needs to have, so you, the young person, your young person, you would need to have a history of that need. So what is your current support needs? How are you currently supported every day in school, in the classroom? So it might be that, you know, a young person or you who is eligible for extra time, that might be because actually on a day-to-day basis that you need support in terms of because of the speed of your writing, for example. It might be that you need extra time because of reading. It might be that you need extra time in terms of reading comprehension. It might be that you need extra time to process information. But all of these things need to be things that have been identified as part of your normal support needs, really. And also, these needs often need to be backed up by reports from specialists. So it might be from, for example, an educational psychologist. It might be from specialist teachers, and if these access arrangements are being applied for, then that would be something that would support those access arrangements. There are 4 sort of areas of need that are considered when they are looking at exam access arrangements, and that is cognition and learning. It might be it'll be communication, it'll be those sensory and physical needs, and social, emotional, mental health. Diagnosis is not needed, but there does need to be that evidence of need, and it does need to be their normal way of working. It needs to be the type of support that they're already being provided with. And some of the examples of the additional arrangements, those additional adjustments that can be made for our young people could be things like extra time, for example. So usually they'll get around 25% additional time. So you know, again, it's not something that's set in stone. It's not necessarily based on diagnosis. It's based on students that it's recognised and being assessed as that they need that extra time as a normal way of working. It might be that they need a reader. So particularly if you think about some of our young people may, for example, have visual impairments, or it may be that they've got a disability or of some sort. That means that they find it difficult to read accurately themselves. So they might get someone that can read the text, read the questions for them. It could be for some of our young people that they need a scribe, that particularly again, you know, if they're not able, if they struggle with writing legibly, or yeah, a prompter. So a prompter can be someone to support young people who maybe struggle to stay on task. It might be for some of our young people that they need a separate room. So a lot of our students, they, you know, particularly if we're thinking about, for example, those sensory challenges, it might be that they need to have a separate room to be able to complete the exam, or a rest break, a movement break, those supervised rest breaks and movement breaks to support them as well. Modified papers sometimes, and these can be ordered in advance. So that might be papers that are needed in different sizes, different fonts, different colours, braille, for example, and then assistive technology. So if you're a young person, if you use assistive technology already, then, and that's part of your normal way of working, then that should be able to continue for your exams. So again, just thinking about speaking to the SENCO about, you know, what reasonable adjustments, what access arrangements can be made with them under the discretion of the SENCO, or what access arrangements can be applied for. Now, usually you've had these conversations with that spring term, so before now, usually these are things that have been applied for and organised in the spring term by the latest. So if that's something that hasn't happened, I would sort of have those conversations as soon as possible, really, because the applications should have already been made. Just thinking about now some ideas in terms of general strategies, how you can support yourself, how your young person, you can support your young person. A lot of our neurodivergent young people, a lot of you guys will rely on structure, on routine, in general anyway, and that certainly stays the case in terms of being able to cope, being able to support revision and exams. So developing a good structure, a good routine, so that you can be able to, you know, a consistent study schedule really, and a study pattern can be really supportive for you in terms of your revision. So it might be that you build and you plan your study structure, your routine or your schedule around studying sort of the same time each day. There might be an optimal time of day. Some people find that their optimal time of day might be first thing in the morning, for some it might be in the evening, some it might be after they've done some exercise. So thinking about what is the best time of day that is sort of suits you in terms of studying. There might be a couple of different periods throughout the day when you find it best to study. For me, for example, if I was going to be studying for something, I would do it first thing in the morning, because that's when my optimal level is. I don't do very well late in the evening. So thinking about that for yourself, for your young person, when we're establishing that routine, when we're preparing that schedule as well. But thinking about how that schedule is going to look as well when you're creating that daily schedule. So it might be, using wall charts and just using a whiteboard, maybe sort of doing a computer printout to create that schedule. Again, when will you start? When will you take breaks? What are you going to include the dates for your exams, so that you can be specific in terms of what subjects you're going to study and when, keeping yourself on track. Try and avoid where possible, try and avoid cramming, try and avoid lengthy study sessions, sort of breaking them down into more smaller manageable tasks can be more helpful as well. Make sure when you're planning your schedule as well that you think about things that you enjoy, include doing activities that you enjoy, include things that you're going to look forward to, include time with your friends. It can't be all about the revision, because that's not going to be helpful. So thinking about, and also making sure that your revision plan is realistic as well. There's no point in planning things that are not going to be achievable, because firstly, that's going to knock your confidence, going to knock your self-esteem when you haven't achieved it. But also it means then you've got to go back to thinking about how you plan your time again. Also thinking about when you are organising this schedule, about where are you going to do this studying? Are you going to have one place? Do you benefit from revising in different environments, different situations, whatever that, if it's the same place all the time, thinking about having everything that you're going to need to be able to study effectively in that place, so that you're not having to go and find all the time. Building that preparation time into your routine as well. Or if you're somebody that benefits from studying in different situations, different environments, then thinking about, okay, so maybe having a bag that has everything in it, so that you can take that bag from environment to environment. You're not again having to sort of look around, scratch around, trying to find everything that you need. Thinking about preparation, so start studying for your exams well in advance. Don't wait until the night before. Don't think that cramming that information in is the best way. Check that you know how to study as well. Check that your young person knows how to study. It might be, there's lots and lots of different ways of studying, lots of different studying techniques. So think about the best way that you learn, the best way that your young person learns. So like I said, it might be that they learn best in a particular environment. It might be that they learn best in a number of different environments, thinking, particular time of day. But also thinking about, do they learn best when they're moving? Do they learn best when they're sat still, focusing on something? Thinking about, do they learn best? And it might be that it's a number of strategies, not just one particular strategies. Do they learn best if they're writing things down? Do they feel best if they are setting small goals? Do they work best if they work on one topic at a time, so one topic per day, for example? Do they benefit from sort of small worksheets, practice papers? So getting all those things prepared in advance, thinking about what would be helpful for your young person or for yourself. Think about the environment. So, not just the environment in terms of the exam, but the study environment as well. Like I've said, for some young people, it might be that they benefit from a dedicated study space. And if that's the case, do we need to eliminate all the distractions? Are our young people or are you easily distracted? Thinking about what is on the walls, what is around us, you know, what is in that room. Are they likely to be distracted by their technology if their game consoles are in that room? And where are their phones? Think about the physical positioning as well. You know, are they sat in a place where there's going to be lots of visual stimulation? Do we need to use pop-up screens, dividers, and thinking about auditory you know, stimulation, thinking about noise. Are they going to be sat in, do they need the room to be completely quiet? Do they need to be in a room where there's not going to be lots of people coming and going? So for example, sitting at the kitchen table when there's people coming in and out, going to the fridge, preparing meals, you know, thinking about those types of distractions as well. It might be that they benefit from, again, thinking about ear defences or earplugs, listening to music as well. For some young people, it might be that they need complete quiet. Some others may well benefit from listening to some music. Thinking about the actual desk or table that they're sat at as well. So are they sat in a comfortable chair? Is it upright? Are their feet firmly on the ground? You know, have they got fidget resources if that's something they benefit from? Thinking about, do they, if they struggle in terms of managing time, would they benefit from having a timer in the room as well? Also, is there opportunities for them to take movement breaks within that environment, or can they leave the room and go and take a movement break? Removing any unnecessary items, really making sure that you've got enough space to spread out your notes, spread out your textbooks that you need. And for me, you know, when I'm doing something new, I'll have a whole host of books out. I'll have books highlighted, post-it notes everywhere. So is there enough space to accommodate all of that? Is the lighting at the sort of optimum for you, for your young person? So is there enough light? Is it too bright? You know, just thinking about all those environmental factors that may well impact on our young people. Think about revision in general. So, you know, being able to identify the best way for our young people to revise, getting into the habit of revising regularly. I think it is certainly, you know, and particularly sooner rather than later, really practicing daily revision techniques is really helpful, and not just in your designated area to revise, maybe not just when you're at home, not just during your study periods in school, but even when you're walking to the bus stop, even, you know, if you're walking the dog, thinking about ways that we can support that revision. And there's lots of ways we can support revision. So it might be that we use things like mind maps. It might be that we create revision posters, and revision posters can be kept up on the wall in the bedroom, they can be put up on the wall in the kitchen, and it just means we've got sort of snapshot revision every time you go into your bedroom, every time you go into the kitchen, and any rooms that it might be helpful. Any type of pictures, post-its, bullet points, lists, thinking about small flashcards as well that will fit into your pocket so that you can take them anywhere with you. You can take it out and be reading that information, sitting on the bus, going to Nan's, you know, about in the car when you're on your way shopping, or, you know, like I said, just sort of going for a walk with the dog. Anywhere where you've got access to just go over these bullet points can be really, really helpful. Creating, thinking about colour coding your revision so that you know what colour is for what topic, for example, or maybe blocking colour coding key pieces of information, highlighting key pieces of information as well. Making sure that your revision notes are short and to the point, that you've got, you know, that key information and not any sort of irrelevant information as well. Having post-its just placed around the house as well. Thinking about using things like rhymes to remember blocks of information that you can repeat to yourself regularly. Or try even using technology, so recording your notes on your voice memo on your phone so that you can play them back over and over. Maybe then you can listen to them when you're walking the dog. You can listen to them when you're traveling to and from school. Create podcasts using your voice memos as well, listening back to them. Thinking about maybe teaching somebody else. Teaching somebody else is a good way to demonstrate knowledge and to identify any gaps as well. So prepare a presentation, for example. Rewrite information. Rewriting your notes is a really good way to review information and to transfer information from your short-term memory into your long-term memory. Having those flashcards available wherever you go. Using things like Quizlet. So there's a website called Quizlet where they can help you prepare flashcards, help you with tests as well. And then getting other people to test you, getting other people to test you on those flashcards. It might be that, you set yourself up a little quiz, ask a parent, ask a friend, ask a peer, ask a brother, ask a sister to help you to sort of go through those revision notes in a way that is helpful to you. Practice, practice, practice. So practice those think about things like exam papers, for example. One of the most effective ways to prepare for exams is to practice previous versions. So that can help you sort of get used to the format of the questions. It can also help you if you struggle with moving on from one question to the next. It can help you with practicing thinking, okay, I'm going to leave that question there and I can come back to it at the end. It can help you practice pacing yourself. So you can do it in a sort of set yourself up a sort of a mock exam, or get someone to help you with that, so that it's timed. So you've got to practice completing those questions within that time, and then that helps you practice pacing yourself as well. But so practice exam papers, practice tests, worksheets, at school, if you can have some practice worksheets, test your knowledge quiz, get someone to set that up at school if they can do that. And then just using those mind maps, identifying where your gaps are really is key, I think. Think about your well-being. So quite often for our young people, for yourself, one of the things you're that busy with, worrying about the exams, worrying about revision, thinking about ways that you can revise effectively, that we don't necessarily always prioritize well-being. And so thinking about, taking breaks, downtime. Actually, by taking breaks, by having something that you doing things that you enjoy, having that time for downtime, for relaxing, increases focus and increases attention. Think about maybe getting some physical activity, particularly during your breaks. I always say movement then brain, movement then brain. So having some physical activity, it might just be a walk, but taking those opportunities to include some physical activity can really help with that focus and that concentration. Improves your mood as well. Support those executive function skills that I mentioned before. So thinking about support our ability to be able to organise and plan effectively. Support our working memory. Practice relaxation techniques. So relaxation techniques, rather, couldn't get that word out then. Those relaxation techniques can help with when we're feeling a little bit overwhelmed with revision, but also can be taken into the exam situation, so can really help. So thinking about things like deep breathing, mindfulness, progressive muscle relaxation, grounding techniques, those things can be really helpful. Making sure we get plenty of sleep, don't stay up till all hours in the morning cramming. Actually, that can have the opposite effect. So yes, by all means, if evenings is the best time for you for studying in the evenings, but then make sure that you sort of have a cut-off point. You have a time when you're going to stop, take some time to relax, and then get a good night's sleep. It can certainly seem like a good idea, particularly the night before the exam, to stay up late and to cram in some extra revision, but actually that can have the opposite effect on us. And certainly lack of sleep can exacerbate anxiety. It can mean that we can feel more anxious, more stressed. So getting a good night's sleep, eating well, you know, particularly before that exam, making sure that you've had something to eat, and keeping yourself really well hydrated, thinking about trying to avoid drinks that are high in caffeine. Again, the drinks that are high in caffeine, I know they're quite popular nowadays, but drinks that are high in caffeine can actually exacerbate anxiety and make us feel a little bit more jittery. So just trying to think about that. And then speaking to your parents, your carer, or to a friend about what is it that you're anxious about, what is it that you're worried about, because if other people know what you're worried about, then we can help you put sort of identify strategies to support with that. So being open, reflecting continually, thinking about what are your anxieties about. On the exam day, so you know, obviously we're more likely to feel nervous, to feel anxious on the actual exam day. So be prepared, you know, avoid cramming. Hopefully you will have had a really good revision schedule. You'll have studied all your material in advance. Okay, so hopefully you're prepared in terms of your material, but also just thinking about, you know, having your clothes ready, having your bag packed the night before, so that you're not worried about that. Making sure you've set your alarm nice and early for when you get up, so that you can get up with plenty of time. That if you're having to rush round before your exam, then that again is going to increase anxiety, stress that you don't need to add. So thinking about being prepared for the day, thinking about your journey as well to the exam, you know, and thinking about if you're walking or giving yourself plenty of time. If you get in the bus, think about what happens if a bus is cancelled, a bus is late, you know. If you're going on the car, thinking about what happens if traffic's particularly busy, if there's roadworks. I would plan for all of those things so that you've not got that additional stress. Get into the exam with plenty of time. Thinking about, you know, I've mentioned sleep. It's really difficult to perform your best if you haven't had you know, a good night's sleep, if you're feeling tired or overtired. Or poor sleep also impacts on those executive function challenges. So if you're already struggling in those areas, sleep is going to exacerbate that. So making sure, you know, that we get plenty of sleep the night before, and the early night if we can. Exercise. So exercise, like I've said, can increase alertness, can sharpen your mind, increase your ability to focus, to concentrate. So it might be that normally, you know, you would get a lift to school. So can you walk to school? Can you walk, or can you do some other type of exercise before the exam? Thinking about you know, your seat position, if you've had the opportunity to, if you can get there early enough, thinking about where is the best place for you to be sat as well. And then practice things like you know, breathe. And if you've been practicing breathing techniques in advance, you can use that in the exam room, like I've said. So using those deep breathing techniques, practicing mindfulness, grounding techniques. So by using those techniques in the exam room, it can just help calm you before you start the exam. Things like the 5 things grounding technique. So just give yourself a moment before you start the exam to think, okay, name 5 things that I can see, name 4 things I can hear, 3 things I can smell, 2 things you can touch, 1 thing you can taste, just to get you present in the moment and calm as well. It might be before you get to this exam as well, before you sort of arrive at the exam. If music is something that helps you to sort of calm, then listening to some music beforehand as well. And thinking about maybe sort of having a little mantra for yourself, using positive affirmation as well. And so just saying to yourself, I've prepared really well for this, I've got all the knowledge, I can do this. and thinking about, you know, things like chewing gum as well during the test, if that's something that you can do, that can really help in terms of focusing the mind, keeping you on task as well. And then the exam itself. So just thinking about, you know, really taking a few minutes to review the entire exam, just taking a few minutes to see what it is, go through it, maybe try and break it down into sections as well. For some people, what a strategy can sometimes be to go through it and do the parts that they find easiest first, and then they can go back to the parts that they find more difficult, but breaking it down into sections in a way that suits you, pacing yourself as well, you know, so we don't want to rush through a test. We don't, remember, for some of us, you know, we can be quite impulsive, and I've answered that, move on, I've answered that, move on. So actually pacing yourself, not rushing, but also making sure that you are able to give yourself enough time for each section. And then, like I said, if you've got extra time left, you can go back to that. You know, don't worry about blank moments. If you come to a question and you just you know that you've studied for, you know the answer, but it's just not coming to you. Sitting thinking about it, wasting time focusing on that is not going to be helpful. Move on to the next question, and then it can come back. It might be, as you go through the exam, that actually other questions sort of trigger something and help you remember what it was that you need to answer that question. Also thinking about multiple choice questions, you know, if there's multiple choice, thinking about eliminating the most obvious ones first, and then, you know, then that sort of reduces those choices as well. Essay questions, if it's an essay question, so it might, you know, sort of quickly making an outline, maybe some bullet points of the things that you want to cover in that within that essay questions as well. Taking short breaks, so it might be that, you know, you're not entitled to a movement break, you can't access a movement break, but actually just taking a minute, taking a breath, you know, taking a pause, taking a few breaths, say your positive affirmation phrase, whatever it is, and just take a minute to maybe untense any muscles that are feeling tense. Just pause them for a little bit, and remember, use all your time. Don't sort of rush. Don't leave early. Don't sort of think, I've finished, I'm done. Go through it. There's no reward for being the first to finish the exam. And then after the exam, you know, try not to dwell on anything that you feel like you haven't done. It might be that you feel like you've made mistakes when you come out. We all do that. We all think, oh, we should have done this, I should have said that, I should have written that. But try not to dwell on that, you know, avoiding the sort of perfectionist trap, really. Don't expect to be perfect. We all forget things, we all make mistakes. We can only know that we've done our best in that moment. Try and relax after the exam, you know, congratulate yourself or congratulate your young person, and then afterwards maybe reflect and then think about, you know, what areas did you struggle with, what knowledge can you take from that, what can you learn from that previous exam to take into your next exam. So thinking about that as well. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. If there's any questions, Molly?
Yeah, that was brilliant. Thank you so much, Tracy. We've had a few questions coming in, so we'll try and get through as many as we can. The first one came through on email. This was, my son has dyspraxia and mainly uses a laptop and touch typing to record work. How will this work in exams? Can they come in online format? Also, is 2-to-1 TA allowed to assist in any way during exams?
So these are the conversations that you really need to have with the SENCO. Ideally, these conversations should have been had anyway. So like I said, some of the adjustments are available. So if that's their normal way of working, then they should be things that are you know, applied in the exam situation. So they may be things that are at the discretion of the SENCO. If it's something that the SENCO needs to apply for, for those exam access arrangements, then ideally that should have already been done. So I would have that conversation with your SENCO to see what is being agreed, what can or can't happen, what is at their discretion, and if it's not something that is at their discretion, can they apply for that, or have they already applied for that? But I would want to know that as part of the preparation for that, and for your young person.
Brilliant, thank you, Tracy. Next question is, my son is age 17, is really struggling with burnout. He manages to keep it all in during his day at college, but when he gets home, he's absolutely wiped out and not able to do any extra study at home. He's now really starting to panic because he hasn't revised for all his A-levels. Any advice, please?
So again, I would be having conversations with school. I would be saying, is there any way that revision is something that is built into his day so that he's not burnt out? Also looking at how is he studying as well? What are his strategies? Is he overloading himself? Are the study strategies that he's using currently, are they successful? Are they supportive? What are the best ways for him? So like I've said, it could be, doing a podcast, something that he can listen to over and over. Can that be something that he does in school? Or could it be something that is done at the weekend, maybe when he's had a nice chilled morning, and then maybe spending time with your son to talk about, okay, what are the best ways for you to sort of learn this information? What is going to be the best way so that you're not experiencing that burnout, that overwhelm? Is it going to be about putting together a podcast, putting together a presentation, something you can watch over and over, something you can listen to over and over, rather than sitting down and physically studying? If we do it that way as well, once we've done it, once we've recorded it, then we're not sort of rewriting things over and over. We're just listening to it, and it's something that we can put on, like I said, walking to school, walking the dog, in the car going to Nan's, on the way to an activity, and can take the pressure off a little bit. But I think the key is, when is their optimal study time? How can that be built into the day? Having those conversations with burnout with the SENCO, with school. Do they get allocated study time within school as well? If so, how can they use that time and the best study techniques to do so during that time? Hope that helps.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Tracy. And the next question is, my daughter suffers with sensory/overwhelm migraines and struggles to focus. What happens if she has one on the day?
Oh, I mean, if a migraine comes on, there's nothing you can do. What I would be doing is thinking about all the ways that we can support her in terms of her sensory needs to try and prevent that migraine coming on. And I appreciate, with all the best will in the world, that might be something that, no matter what we do, is really difficult, particularly if they are in an environment that they find particularly difficult. So what I would be doing is thinking about, okay, what are the sensory challenges that are going to mean that your daughter is going to struggle? And then having those conversations with the SENCO about the best way to meet that. So if it is about, she's really going to struggle in a big environment with lots of people, maybe about the acoustics in the room. It might be about where she's sat, if there's windows by doorways. It might be about certain lights. It might be the need for a movement break. Again, having that conversation with the SENCO about how at their discretion are these things that can be managed. But keeping our young people as well, it could be things like struggling with certain types of clothes, thinking about, are they comfortable, are they hydrated, is there any calming activities that they can do before they go into that exam, keeping them as calm as possible and meeting those sensory needs as much as we can. But I do appreciate that, with all the best will in the world, sometimes, if that migraine comes on, then there's nothing that we can do about that. So it's about, I would say, prevention rather than think about, oh, what do you usually do to try and prevent your young person that the onset of a migraine, I suppose, and including all that, and having those conversations with the Senko. This is potentially something that's going to happen. How can we best support here? What can you accommodate? And you know, that's probably the best advice I can give. Sorry.
Great, thanks, Tracy. I think we've just got time for one more. My daughter will, for example, do a paper on fractions. After helping with 1 or 2 examples, she will proceed to do almost all the questions well, achieving nearly 100%. Then the next day, she has no memory of having done the fractions. She can't remember how to do it. We have gone through this year after year and she still struggles. How do we support her to improve her attention and working memory? She has ADHD and autism.
Repetition, practice. Unfortunately, I know that can be something that is really difficult for our young people to be able to grasp. But I would, if that's their area where they're struggling, and I appreciate that it's something that you've been doing over the years, but I would just make sure that consistently that's what you're working on. Maybe trying to, it's really difficult when it's maths in particular. It's not my area either, I'll be honest. Probably the worst person to talk to about fractions, but I would just, I suppose it's about being able to transfer that information as well from one situation to another. So being able to generalize that information from one situation to another, and maybe speak to the Senko about whether they've got any other ideas about how they, you know, techniques in terms of remembering things like fractions, which I think is more difficult. But definitely keep going with the repetition and the practice, and then have those conversations with the Senko. Sorry I can't be of more help in that particular situation.